Welcome to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. This podcast is a safe place to connect with other NICU moms by listening to interviews with trauma-informed medical and maternal mental health experts, remarkable stories from the NICU, and intentional roundtable conversations.
Our hope is that you feel like you're sitting across the table from another NICU sister and feel seen and validated in your experience. No matter where you are on your healing journey, this podcast is here to remind you that you are not alone. Welcome to the sisterhood.
Hello and happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the podcast. We have a very wonderful episode in store for you today, and we are doing one of our favorite kinds of episodes, which are roundtable episodes. And if you are an avid listener of the podcast, you've listened to quite a few different varieties we have of these, all from different topics like back to school, birthdays and anniversaries, therapies, navigating life in and out of the NICU. And being that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, Aisha had this wonderful idea to do a roundtable all about mental health surrounding the NICU. So Aisha, do you want to talk a little bit about your vision and heart for this episode?
Yes, of course. Most importantly, I didn't want this to be like a do this, do that sort of episode because I feel like everybody's journey is going to be unique to them and their process is going to be unique to them. But I did wanted to make it a little more, I don't know, maybe less taboo and a conversation that we can listen to and feel less alone. Like, I struggle with this too. And it's good to hear someone else who has had similar struggles and how they, what steps they took or how they dealt with it or what feelings they had. So it was mostly just to have a sense of sisterhood, right? We always try to bring to the table whenever we have an episode with a mom. And in this case, we're going to have two amazing NICU moms, and they're also part of the Dear NICU Mama team. We have Kamille from the editorial team and Lexxa, who manages Facebook. So you probably have seen both of them on our social medias. Kamille has chickens. Her chickens actually made it onto one of her reels. And Lexxa is just awesome at keeping the Facebook under control, safe. And she's just a boss lady. So I'm so excited that they agreed to come on tonight and kind of just share their journeys with mental health. I know it's a super important topic for both of them. And so I'm just really grateful that they decided to join us on this conversation. And I think it's going to be a really good one.
Me too. When you had sent me what do you think about Kamille and Lexxa? I was like, 1,000%, let's do it. And it's also really just fun to connect with the two of you. And I can't wait for you guys to introduce yourselves in a minute because the both of you are so transparent about your journeys just on your own Instagrams. And from the very beginning that we've had the chance to connect, I can 100% say that your vulnerability helped me be vulnerable. And so I can't think of two better moms to talk about this topic. And also as a major throwback, Kamille, I don't know if you remember, one of the first ever videos we posted on our Instagram was a reshare of a TikTok you made, and you had this cute short haircut. And I remember the orange background, and you were talking about your medication, and it was during a trend of hi, I'm a NICU mom. I take this much Lexapro or milligrams of this. And it was so beloved by moms because it was oh my gosh, she's normalizing taking medication because after the NICU, you're always so nervous about can I pump with this? Can I do this? Is this going to affect everything else in my life? And it just was so affirming for moms to know that there were other NICU moms that embraced that journey for themselves. So I find it to be so cool that we're having this conversation today since you were one of the first faces we really put to the importance of mental health from the very beginning. So we love you both dearly, and I'm just so excited to have this conversation with you guys.
Me too. And so on that note, would you guys like to introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of, both of you have shared on the podcast before your incredible NICU journeys. So we will make sure to have those linked in the description of the episode so you guys can have a listen if you haven't, because they're both remarkable stories. But would you be able to give us a little rundown of a little bit of your NICU journey, and that way we can get to know you a little bit before we dive in? So I don't know, Kamille, if you wanted to start.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to be here. And yes, I totally remember that video with my pixie short hair. And it's funny
It was
because
so cute.
I was actually like really in the depths of postpartum when I did that video. I think maybe that was one of the only times that I emerged from the darkness to share some sort of light and humor. Um, so I remember
I
that video
love
very
it.
well. But yeah, I am a mom to 2 boys, and one of them was in the NICU. Um, Owen is now 4 years old, but during our 20-week anatomy scan, we're super stoked because we were like, "We're gonna find out gender. We don't need secrets." And then we found out gender, but then we also found out that he had a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, which essentially meant that his diaphragm didn't complete. And so his stomach and his intestines, they were all up in his chest. So compressing the growth of his lungs and, moving his heart to the side. So from 20 weeks on, we had to sort of prepare for the inevitable, very sickly birth that he was going to have. We knew he was going to be intubated. We had to choose what hospital we would deliver at. So we did a bunch of research because that was the only thing we could really do to prepare us for this like inevitable thing that was going to happen. So we had Owen. It was an emergency C-section because, well, why not? We're already in it. Let's throw that into the mix. So we had that, and then he was intubated, but he totally kicked butt in the NICU. They thought we were going to be there for months, and we were there for 3 weeks. And they'll also tell you like CDH babies are one of the sickest babies in the NICU because they're not necessarily thriving when they're born, and they can go in ECMO, and there's all these sorts of complications and unknowns that can happen. And he had surgery when he was 3 days old, but even still, he just totally beat all the odds and just surprised everybody in the NICU. And so when we got home at 3 weeks, everyone was just like, this is like the example. This is like what we want to see. And like, we want you to go home and have that kind of support and vision and sort of like as much positive experience as you can have with it. That's where we landed. So they answer everything.
Yeah.
That does. Well, and I found the reel. I want to play the audio.
Oh my gosh.
I want to do it. Okay.
Stop. I'm going to close my eye.
There. It's okay to get help. Being in the NICU period is traumatizing and isolating. So the birth of your baby didn't go as planned, but your journey can still be celebrated as much as it can be mourned. You are not alone, and you're braver than you feel.
Y'all taught me that.
Oh,
It's just like one of my favorites, and you're so stinking adorable. I can't.
Yes.
I love that video.
Y'all taught me that like towards the end, and like just knowing that it's okay, and that like I think the idea that you can grieve a loss without having maybe physically lost something was a very new concept. Just kind of like PTSD and it not being, just for war heroes. That was just a wildly new concept for me. And so that was something that dear NICU mama taught me. Was like, oh, I can grieve this experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
That's so beautiful. And we're so happy that your Owen is thriving in 4 and he's such a miracle baby. Lexxa, do you want to give us a little introduction?
Yes, hi. I'm so excited to be back. I am Lexxa. I'm from Indiana, and I have 2 preemies. So my first preemie was a 28-weeker. She was in the NICU for 88 days. And then we came home on like oxygen and an NG tube. So then it didn't end when we came home.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
Yep.
And then my second, he was also a preemie. So I also got sick with him, and he was also an emergency C-section, but he did not have a NICU stay, which is awesome. So I had a take-home baby after my NICU baby. And yeah, I think that's a little intro.
The condensed version, right?
Condensed, yes, for sure, condensed. Yes.
You were one of the first people that I really got to know that had a baby that came home on oxygen. And I remember just being so in awe of you. I still am, but especially at the time, like you just made it so, you made it look so effortless, even though I know it wasn't, but you just like embraced the medical mom life so beautifully. And I remember like discussions about like, yeah, you had to plan like if my trip is this many hours away, do I have enough oxygen? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like the math you have to do on a daily to make that happen. And so it's just so fun to see the ways that both of your kids have thrived and how you have thrived. And I just can't believe how old everybody's kids are.
I know.
I know.
It's like
I didn't know Owen was
wild.
also 4. Allie's 4. She's going to be 5 this year.
Yeah.
So crazy.
I am not ready.
Same.
Our little babies are all grown up now.
Well, it says almost like how old dear NICU mama is, right?
Yeah, dear NICU Mama is 5.
Wow.
We just turned 5. Yeah. So Silas just turned 5. So I always joke that like my business baby and my real baby are the same age. Like they've grown up together, basically. Because Silas literally came home March 29th. His due date was the 27th. And then dear NICU Mama was born in April like 15th or something like that. Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
then it was like Mother's Day was when we made the announcement. So just crazy.
Well, let's also
But-
talk about how amazing that is that you were just coming home after a NICU stay and you started this whole thing.
It was a
Martha.
desperation for community. I was just like, I need friends that have gone through this.
Yes.
I'm alone. And so thanks you guys for being a part of it.
That's a great way to start this conversation because I think that's a big part of, we just had birth trauma mama on last week, and she was talking about like one of the first things that you can do to help with trauma is finding that community, right? And so like dear NICU mama, finding this community, I'm pretty sure every one of us has had dear NICU mama part of their mental health journey and healing journey because I speaking for myself, it has been, that was really, I think, one of the stepping stones for me to like really dive into a lot of what I was processing and just knowing that I wasn't alone in it and finally seeing on Instagram people that I could relate to, words that were speaking to my soul. And I felt like these are my people. Like this is where I'm going to finally be able to move forward and see the beauty in my story and you know, transform my story from ashes to, you know, this beautiful story that now I can celebrate. I just, dear NICU mama has been instrumental. And so thank you for being courageous enough to start something.
Seriously, I did not get to meet any NICU moms in my NICU because we had our own rooms. So I think everyone just like went into their room, closed the door. And then I didn't even know what the NICU was.
Right.
Until like we were in it. And then I told Ashley this, but I still remember when dear NICU mama followed me back on Instagram. And I was like, Hobby Lobby with my mom. I was like, oh my gosh, mom, they follow me back.
Like
I was so
immediately
happy.
when we saw you, were like, yeah, follow back. There's no question.
Wow.
No, I love it. Well, maybe then is kind of a starting point. We can all just share a little bit about how, you know, we maybe saw some of the initial effects of the NICU in our mental health, and maybe too also including a little bit of, was mental health something that was that a part of your journey prior to the NICU? I know some of us come into the NICU already with anxiety or depression, and then a NICU journey can just heighten it. So I'd love to know kind of like how the NICU affected your mental health and when you maybe began to realize like, oh, like I need to maybe take that courageous next step and talk with a provider. So I'd love to hear from you guys of kind of what that looked like for you.
I can start. So for me, I did not, now like looking back, my therapist thinks that I probably always had like general anxiety, but I did not like, know anything about that until after the NICU. But I will say that I think my mental health went downhill when I got put on bed rest. Like I have a lot of trauma still, like me in a hospital, like that's like a whole thing. So Allie was born Friday, I got discharged the next Thursday. And that I was already struggling like in the NICU. I remember like writing down in my notes app. I actually found the notes where I was like if Ali can be upstairs fighting, like I can fight down here too. Like,
Oh.
and then like I'm like, if she's a fighter, I can be a fighter, and like all that stuff.
Mm.
Because I was losing my mind. Like I wanted to go home
Yeah.
so bad. And then so we went home Thursday. That Friday, I called the EAP, and I was like, I don't know if it was that same Thursday night. I think it was maybe the same Thursday night. And I remember calling the lady. It was like nighttime. And I was like, I think I need a therapist. And she's like, oh, okay, like talk to me. And I was like, yeah, well, like, I had a baby and she's in a NICU and she was born 20. Like, I just like,
Yeah.
casually. And she's like, oh, like, and then I was like, yeah, last Friday. Like,
Yeah.
what? I just got home. I need help. Like, it was very clear
Yeah.
that I was not doing well. I just remember telling Nathan, I'm like, I don't even know who I am. Like, I was like, I am not doing well. I need help.
Mhm.
But I also, I did benefits for my job. So I knew like you call the EAP when you need help. So I called
Sure.
the EAP.
Yeah. Way to go to make that call like right in the middle of it. That's so beautiful.
Like,
Yeah.
And also the fact that you wrote that in your notes, Lexxa, you are such a remarkable mom. That's so
Yes.
beautiful to write that down and to have that.
Yes.
Oh, so beautiful.
I think for me, it was a little less clear that there was something desperately going wrong with, I think, my mental state. I had already experienced trauma prior to this trauma. So I had experienced like childhood trauma and things like that. And so I'd never talked about it and I kind of just dissociated from it. And so that part of my life was buried very deep down. And so there would sometimes be, bouts of depression or what would, become known as like a manic episode. But it all seemed like everything was going really well for a while. Like once I got married, we got a house, we were pregnant, we were doing all the things, and my mental health felt good.
Mhm.
And then we had Owen, and I remember in the NICU feeling very dissociated
Mhm.
and just not connected to the world around us.
Mhm.
My husband, Jock, he took charge. Like he was the one who's in constant communication with the doctors and the nurses and the therapists. And I was very just kind of like in a corner, scared to move. And then when we got home, um, there was just this other change in me where I was just angry. I was so angry. And I did not know that postpartum depression and PTSD would also be in the form of anger. I just thought it was, you know, someone has like these intrusive thoughts about harming their baby or harming themselves. But for me, it was like intrusive thoughts about harming myself, but I didn't want to do anything about it. Like I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to call for help. And my husband, bless his heart, but he also did not come from a background of understanding mental health. So he didn't know what to do with me. Um, it wasn't until I was talking to Owen's nurse, where she finally was like, how are you doing? No, I don't want to know about Owen. We know how Owen's doing. How are you doing? And she was really the first person, I think, to kind of like do mental checks on me, and really see that I was struggling and then push me to talk to a psychiatrist, get diagnosed. And then even in that, like that was a journey. It was a struggle between like, Jacques and me and having a complex baby at home and going through the motions of PTSD and postpartum. And, my psychiatrist would get on the phone with Jacques and say, she needs to sleep. She needs to sleep or I'm gonna commit her, because that's like the level I was at. So it was a lot harder for me to call out for help. And I feel very, very blessed that there was someone in my life who was watching out for me, even though she was supposed to be watching out for my son. But she was definitely, I'm very, very, very grateful for her.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And thank you for sharing that. And I relate to a lot of your story in the sense of I too had some childhood trauma that I never really addressed. And then that kind of led to me not really getting in touch with my own feelings and my needs and my wants. And so I'm like a textbook people pleaser, put everybody in front of me, don't ask how I'm doing. And so when I was in the NICU, well, we had lost Enzo in 2018, and I kind of just brushed over and was like, we're just going to focus on the next step. We're not going to dwell. We're just going to keep moving forward, push through. And then Ava was in the NICU, and it was also pandemic, and I was disassociating. I was in my own little bubble where I would go to the NICU for 2 hours and then go home and like binge watch whatever was on Netflix and just like wait until the next day to go back to the NICU. And it wasn't until I got home and was experiencing very similarly to you that rage, and I just would cry out of anger all day. And Andy was going back to work, so I was on my own. And I just remember telling Andy one day, like, something's not okay. I don't know why I'm feeling this way, and I think that I need to talk to someone about it. And so I didn't know who to call. I just started asking my friends, like, who would be a good therapist, and started emailing a bunch of different providers until I got one person who wrote me back. And then I started therapy, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, there is a lot to unpack here, and a lot of just unprocessed grief. And she was the one that actually told me to write a letter to Dear NICU Mama. And that's how I got connected to Dear NICU Mama. And so, but yeah, so similarly, I kind of was ignorant of my own mental health for a very long time until there was like nowhere to run from it anymore. Like it was just, I either face it or who knows what would have happened. So yeah.
I think you mentioned something that we see a lot of times on our Facebook group, which is when people talk about, you know, how do I go home when my baby's in the NICU? Like, how do I process that? And there's always a lot of, you know, positivity around that, but what you don't hear is the vice versa of that. It's I don't want to go to the NICU. I don't want to see my baby right now. I just want to go home. And so I think it's really important that, you know, you were able to kind of highlight that as your experience, because that is an experience that I think a lot of moms don't want to talk about, because it's not a happy feeling. It's not a comfortable feeling to say, yeah, no, I would go to TJ Maxx when my kid was in the NICU, because that's one way that I dissociated in some form.
And I have that where like I feel like I cannot relate to that, because I was ready to go home. Like that, when they said I could go home, I was like, Nathan, pack everything up. Like I was like, we gotta get the hell out of here. I was ready to go. I did not, like I was like, oh, I was like, Allie's safe. Like in my mind, everyone was so calm about like, she's gonna come out, she's gonna do great. And like now she's in this little incubator. And it was like, it was very clear in my brain, like, and she's in this thing just like she was in my belly. So she'll just cook in there until her due date. And then that's it. Like, I was like, she's good. Like, I did not think of anything going wrong. Like, I was like, I'm going to go home. I'm out of here. And I was like, I'll come back tomorrow. And then I went back to work right away, which that was like my thing of disassociating. And I didn't realize that I disassociated until like closer to the due date. And even my boss told me, I was like, okay, I'm ready to not be here anymore. I want to go to the NICU. And she's like, okay. And I was like, oh, really? And she's like, yeah. She's like, I was thinking about this. And she's like, I talked to my husband about it. She's like, you disassociated because you thought she was going to die. And now that she's not going to die, now you're ready to like be in the NICU. And I was like,
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I just worked from the NICU then. But I didn't realize, like,
Yeah.
I was fully like, oh, I'm going to disassociate and go to
Mhm.
work. And like, even now when I was thinking, I was like, do I regret anything about that time? I don't even regret like working the whole time, because if not, like, who knows? I would have been like, who knows what would have happened to me?
Yeah.
Like, I needed that
Yeah, absolutely.
balance.
Right. Well, all of this just brings up a really good conversation of, sometimes we think of disassociation and we put like this color of shame on it, right? Because like, oh, I wish I could have been more present, and I wish I just could have like gotten my brain together. I know that's how I felt, at least. But when we like really like take all the layers back, disassociation is just a form of protection. And it's like protecting our heart from what we fear the most. And I know for me, I was trying so hard to not have a breakdown that I did all the right things, almost to the level of like denying myself to feel my truest and most vulnerable feelings. So like for me, I really wanted people to see that I would be okay. Like, so I remember, and my heart was like pure at the time, but like looking back, I wish I could give my younger self a hug and be like, you didn't have to do that, Ash. Like, it's okay. But I like started Zoloft. And while I was in the NICU, I was probably like really fresh. And I took a picture of my pill in my finger because that was trendy at the time, to like show your medication on Instagram. And I posted a picture and I was like so proud of myself for starting that day. And I was like, and again, my heart was pure, but I just wanted people to see like, this is what it looks like to take care of yourself. And I was, trying to normalize medication, but in doing so, I was denying myself the ability to like fully feel how I was feeling. And I was trying so hard to prevent a breakdown when like, this is not medical or, advice or anything, but I feel like it's kind of inevitable to go through the NICU without having some sort of like an emotional breakdown. And a breakdown does not have to be like a week-long stay in a mental hospital. It can be an hour in your car where you're just like, this is the worst thing I've ever had to go through. That kind of a breakdown, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not saying that a breakdown is going to last for weeks and weeks and weeks and we're just going to lose ourselves, but it can be those quiet moments of like, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to go through, and I'm going to give myself permission to break down for a second. And I just didn't give myself permission while I was in the NICU. And we also had a NICU nurse or NICU mom turned nurse on, and she was so vulnerable about how she was just really snappy in the NICU. And I was never snappy because I just didn't want to cause a ruckus. I was just like, nope, I'm going to get through this. And it wasn't until after when I could see that me trying to check all the boxes was just another level of self-protection of like, if I don't break down, then I win this, right? There's no winning. You know what I mean? Like, you're not losing by feeling the things that we so desperately need to feel and honor, and like that duality of grief and joy of like, I can admit that this is the hardest thing and still be grateful and so proud of my baby. But if I deny myself the ability to admit my truest feelings in a safe place, right? With a trusted professional, like a mental health therapist or a safe community, I'm really robbing myself of this like beautiful layer of healing that my heart desperately needed. And that definitely didn't come for me until after my son was home.
Yeah. Well, and
Sorry, that was very long-winded.
No, that's beautiful. And it brings up to this, because I can see, and I felt myself just, I didn't know anyone else in the NICU and in my life. And as well-intentioned as my family and friend and support system was, hearing over and over again, you're so strong. I can't imagine how you're doing this. You are incredible. You are a superhero. Like, oh my gosh, how can you do that? Like, hearing that over and over again, it does kind of also reinforce that narrative in your mind that you have to be strong, because now everybody's watching you And if you
Mhm.
break down, if you show even an inkling of I'm not okay, they're going to know that you're a fraud and that you're not really
Mhm.
strong and that you're not holding it together. And so that
Mhm.
definitely added to me a little bit of this added pressure of like, I need to, like, everything's going to be okay. And I love how you put it, like, check marks, because it did kind of feel like that is like, it's like acing a test. Like, if I do all those steps right, then
Mhm.
everything, it's like willing it to be okay, when in reality, oh, it wasn't okay. And I
Yeah.
think that
Mhm.
to to be able, I think that for me, the first time to be able to admit, like, this is not okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not how it's supposed to be, and it
Mhm.
sucks, and it's unfair, and I don't want it.
Yeah.
That was so big for me to admit out loud.
Yeah.
I still remember my very first meltdown that Ashley was saying. It was day 12. And I went to the parent NICU, like the parent room in the NICU. And I saw, like, I'm just like casually, I'm like, I'm going to go eat. And then I see a little picture of a baby. And I was like, on the fridge. And I was like, oh, this baby looks just like Callie. And then I read her story. They had her story right there. And she died on day 14. And I was like, this is a 28-weeker that died on day 14 that looks just like her. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, well, now we gotta make it to day 14 or she could die because this baby just passed away. And then it hit me like, oh, things could go wrong at any time. Like
Mhm.
I was still in this just like la la land, like, and then I had my whole panic. Like I went home and I think I cried for like 5 hours straight. And I just, because I was like, I don't even know how I'm gonna get through the next 2 days. I wasn't even like thinking like rationally, but
Mhm.
I think it was just all part of
Mhm.
my mental health space. And now that I think about it, I'm like, I don't even remember what I talked to my therapist. Like I started seeing her right away, but I don't know what else we worked on like together.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I remember for me too, it was a long time before we even started really getting into anything like
Mhm.
substantial. I feel like there was a lot of chit chat and a lot of me saying what I think she needed or wanted me to say. So I like in my head would rehearse, like, it's so silly because I would literally right before my therapy session, I would sit and be like, okay, what are the points I'm going to cover today? And I'd have like in my head just like all the little like bullet points of I'm going to talk on this and this and this. And yeah, that was a bulk of the initial therapy sessions for me.
Mhm.
And again, it was not allowing myself to actually really, really have to think about it or really have to feel what I was feeling. Um, and so I think the biggest part for me to that we worked through is just allowing myself to have those feelings.
And when you say that, it makes me think of, for me, I refuse to post photos of Allie. Like I had this whole thing of like, I don't want anyone to see her with all the wires and all that. Like I did not want anyone to see her that way. Like I went through this whole thing of like, no one see her. I wanted everyone to just like, the picture perfect. I was like, when she comes home, then you can see a picture of her. And
Mhm.
in therapy, that was one of the main things she was working on. She's like, you got to let people in because you're taking everything, like, and you want to do everything yourself. Like, I did not call anyone. I did not talk to anyone in my family. Like, it was just, I'm going to NICU. I'm going to work. I'm going to go to NICU. And like, no one sees anything. Like, I'm fine. We don't have to talk about it.
Mhm.
And she told me, she's like, well, I think you should post it on social media and talk about it. And because she's like, you like social media. She's like, it makes you happy to be distracted on Instagram. So she's like, I think you should make a post about Allie. And then I finally made like that first post and I posted a picture of her. And then that was like my homework to talk about it more.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just such a gift of really being able to meet with a provider that specializes in maternal mental health and NICU trauma, if they're available, is
Mhm.
that they understand the vulnerability of like sharing a picture like that and working through, because like maybe to some on the outside that's a small exercise, but to any NICU parent that's huge, being able to share publicly about your baby when you're in the middle of it and you're like, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but here's what today holds. And I mean, that's the beauty of working with the providers. It's just this gentle, like, practice of meeting you where you're at. And really, I hope too that moms listening who maybe haven't set up that first appointment, it can feel incredibly intimidating to be like, I have to relive my NICU trauma every single time I talk with a provider. But again, that's not the case. Like, every provider does their practice differently, but if you're able to find a provider, and we'll make sure to link in the show notes the PSI directory, where they have a directory of providers all over the US, but finding somebody who can meet you where you're at really gently and walk you through. And sometimes it's talking about your NICU, sometimes it's not. It's just wherever you're at that day. But that's the power of working with somebody who specializes in that work, is really helping you really walk through that in like a very full healing way.
Mhm.
And so I would love to know, we're all kind of like that 4-year, 5-year out, and just kind of how your mental health has ebbed and flowed throughout the years. And we talk a lot about this concept of healing is lifelong. And so sometimes we see the NICU as like the NICU happens, and then we have year 1, and then after that it's just kind of blurred. But as all of us oldies know, it still creeps up sometimes. So I would just love to know from you guys what your mental health journey has just looked like over the years, and maybe something that you have found to be really helpful on your journey as you navigate that lifelong healing.
I can go first. So I feel like once Allie went home, I was in my high of like, we're home. Like everything's good. And I remember going down to see my therapist then like maybe once a month, because I was like, I'm fine. Like, I don't have anything to talk about. Like, what do you mean? She's home. Like, and then I got pregnant with Luca. That was not expected. And all of that, like you guys were talking about, you got all this rage and like the dark thoughts and everything, I didn't get until after I had Luca. Like, I just remember being in like super dark, like spot, like just very like intrusive thoughts. And that's when I started medicine. So then, once I found out I was pregnant with Luca, I call her right away. I'm like, we got to see each other now every week because I need my weekly like sessions again to survive this pregnancy. And then even after Luca, like we continued to do video calls, and I had a really hard time like struggling to bond with him. But then I went through my postpartum, like really bad, like it all came out then, like all this rage. I started meds and things got a little bit better. And I will say last year, it was year 4, and I lost my mind. I still remember like losing my mind. And like, I think you guys were texting me to like, are you okay? Like I like ran away to the beach, and I was like, I'm out. Like I'm escaping. Like I'm the disassociate, the escape person. And I told him like, I don't feel good. I just want to go to the beach. It's my happy place. And we like packed up the kids like the same day and just drove like over 14 hours. It was terrible. I do not recommend. And then what I realized was that even after I got there, I was like, oh, I'm still depressed. Like in hindsight, I should have stayed home and like talked to my therapist. And like maybe taking the kids to my mom's house and just gotten a break. But what I learned, and she's like, I think now like you got out of that survival stage, because it was like, look, I was 2, and Ali was getting close to being 4, and then it hit me in like a different wave of it was like I had to process the NICU now, like out of survival mode. And like, and Ali was healthier, like with all her medical issues. And I remember having a conversation with her where she's like, well, maybe like she's fine. Like, like maybe she's not getting healthy and we don't have to, because she was always like the sick baby. We had to keep her contained and And then she's like, no, she's okay. And I had a hard time like letting go of that. So then it was like all this, highs and lows. And now I'm very well medicated and I feel amazing. I feel like I was just talking to my psychiatrist and I was like, this is whatever I'm on right now. Like, it's the perfect thing. And I was like, I don't want to mess with it. So
and what did that feel like for you? Like, I'm just curious, like, did you notice like I feel better just functioning throughout the day? Or was it like, I mean, when did you notice like this is really helping me?
When I was going through my dark stage, my therapist told me to put Post-it notes on my mirror of things that I was grateful for. Because it was like, I don't have anything positive, like things grateful, positive. And I realized I was doing better when I stopped looking at the Post-it notes in the mirror. Like I needed the reminder constantly. So I would like go wake up, go pee, whatever. And I just had to read them. I'm like, I have a reason to be okay and keep going. And then once I stopped looking at the Post-it notes, and then I realized I was like, wait, I haven't needed the reminder. Like I'm actually getting through the day and I'm having fun and like I'm not having dark thoughts and I can actually relax. You know what's another funny thing? Just to, make it funny. I could not finish an episode of a show if it gave me anxiety. I had to skip to the end.
That's
And
me.
no,
I have
no,
to know. I'm a ruiner.
yes, I do it with books and episodes. Well, now, okay, that makes me feel bad.
Can you send me your medication, like whatever you're doing?
I'll send you my cocktail. I'm not doing that anymore. I can actually finish a show and not have to look up ahead to see like who's gonna win or whatever. Because I
What?
will get stressed out. Like I need to know who's gonna win. I don't do that anymore.
Oh my! I'm having a light bulb. Literally annoys Ryan so much because I'm such a ruiner. I will like as soon as the episode has like a plot twist, I'm Googling like who dies or who gets married or do they break up? Like
So, yeah, movies, books, episodes, yes. Because I've been watching, MasterChef. Gordon Ramsay is my thing. So I'm like, who's gonna win? Like I need to know who's gonna win. And if I get through a whole season without Googling it, I'm like, look at me.
that's it. Honestly,
Thank
I'm
you.
so impressed. I
You're
can't
like,
do that
don't
right
change
now.
the dose. Just don't change the dose.
Oh, Camille, what about for you?
I think my mental health has been a journey and an experience. I've learned so much about it along the way. Um, I mentioned, my husband, Jacques, having to be part of this experience because I wasn't experiencing it alone. Like um, he was kind of like a punching bag, not physically, but like he was just
Yeah.
like, he was in the fire of it too. And a lot of
Mhm.
my rage was directed to him and he didn't know what to do and he didn't know how to respond. And so over the course of, these 4 years, we've learned sort of together about mental health and what it means in our relationship to have that support structure. And so I've learned to um, vocalize when I'm not okay. And it doesn't happen as often anymore. I am on medication. I have gone to therapy. I have an amazing NICU nurse who's my therapist. And so she's wonderful and I'm so grateful for her, but like she can't live with me every day, right? So like I
Yeah.
have to lean on the support that's around me.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to, tell Jacques he doesn't understand. Like, and I have to understand, like, he's never going to understand what I'm going through. He's not going to understand what's going on in my brain, why it's foggy, why I'm anxious, why I'm depressed or angry or anything like that. That's not, I had to let that go because I think in the beginning, I so desperately wanted someone to understand. I wanted someone to feel what I felt and understand what I was going through so passionately that it would make me even more angry. And so now I've just come to terms with that's not his experience. He's not going to understand. But if I can at least look to him and say, I'm not doing okay, like I'm not okay, he understands that small phrase means I need some time alone. I need to go sleep in a separate room. I need just some time to myself, or I need to, do we need to make an appointment with my therapist or, have, in the politest way, have you taken your medication today?
Right.
And so I've grown to be more articulate with my needs and my boundaries and to be able to work with a partner who can be receptive even while still not understanding what I'm going through, at least just be there to support. And so I do feel really, really grateful for that. Because that was one of the biggest challenges coming home, which I was like, we're not going to survive this. There's no way.
Yeah.
But but here we are carrying on the journey, and it does get easier. Like I
Yeah.
said, like the ups and downs are not as often, they're not as frequent. They creep their heads up every once in a while. We all kind of know around holidays or special occasions, things like that. Or when your kid gets
Sickness.
sick. That's been my journey, which it's literally just been a journey. It's about learning
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
myself through mental health, my partner through mental health, and like
Mhm.
my support system around me, because without it, like it's so hard to get through it on your own. Like
Yeah.
I would not be here today if it weren't for very special people in my life who
Yeah.
uh, looked after me and cared at me during a very dark time.
Yeah. So beautiful.
Well, yeah, you bringing up that whole your partner and you having different experiences, I think that is huge, because I think that also is like a big revelation for me as well, of just like, yeah, Andy just processes differently than me, and that doesn't mean that he isn't, because my anger would come towards, do you just not care? Like, how are you not as affected as I am? um so communication was key for us to really be
Mhm.
able to understand each other in our ways of processing. Just because his process was internal and not as external as mine didn't mean that he wasn't also in pain or suffering.
Mhm.
And it was just different. And for me, the journey has been, like you all have described, just a roller coaster as well, because it was definitely bumpier at the beginning, and there are moments where it smooths out, and you have bouts of like really good, feeling really great. And sometimes it could be one day from another. Like, I can be feeling really great and very positive, and the next day I can be feeling very stressed and anxious. And something that came up a lot for me was I started to have a lot of anxiety about something happening to me, to the point where I was like begging Andy to buy me an Apple Watch, because I was scared that I would have like fall or have a heart attack and be alone with Ava and no one would know. And so I really wanted something that would alert people if something happened to me,
Mm.
because I like it just all I was so worried all the time about Ava and her making it, that at some point it flipped, and it was then me
Mm.
who could all of a sudden die, and what would
Mhm.
happen to Ava if I wasn't around. Um, so there was a lot there to unpack. And I think something else that is noteworthy of mentioning is, unfortunately, um, getting help and providers to help is not always as accessible and easy, and it's expensive. And there have been times where I've had to
Mhm.
cut back because I just can't afford it.
Yeah.
And in those times, it's been hard, because you do kind of feel like this really sucks. Like, I know that I should be getting help, and it's just
Mhm.
not accessible at the moment. And so we're
Yeah.
all suffering it because of it. Um, and so that has been also a journey of figuring out and reaching out and vulnerably saying, like, I need financial assistance to be able
Mhm.
to see a provider, because I can't do it on my own. And so that has also been like a hurdle to have to like jump over, just to get support. Um, so I definitely wanted to bring that up, because I do think that
Yeah.
that is something that can also have shame surrounding it. And so, but but I think just having community has been for me the number one um, constant that has
Mhm.
stabilized me in my mental health
Mhm.
journey, is just knowing that I can text any one of you guys and say,
Mhm.
help, SOS.
Mhm.
I'm struggling with this, or I just really need to talk to someone about this that understands. Hopping on the
Mhm.
Facebook and venting, and just getting instantly hugged by D+ strangers who just say, I see you, I get this, I see you. And so, yeah, it's wild. And I know that it's just the beginning, and there's just going to continue to be growth in my life, and as Ava grows and as I grow, and it's just going to be a constant transformation. And so just for me, being able to really be honest with myself and check in with myself, because I think that is the hardest part for me, is to really take time to say, hey, how am I feeling? Like, let's take that time to like sit with my own feelings and not be ashamed of them. Like say, hey, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be happy and scared and anxious. Those are feelings that I'm able to now see. And this is not mine, but like I think it might even be from Slumber Kids, like a cartoon my daughter watches. But it's like seeing emotions as visitors and saying, hey, I see you and I'm not going to ignore you, but you can't stay. Like just having that authority in my own like voice of like, I'm going to be in charge. You guys are all welcome, but I'm in charge.
Thank you for sharing that. That was all so beautiful. And I think what I'm realizing about like the lifelong healing journey is like, it just is so different at the different stages that our kids are too. And so like initially I was grieving like that the loss of birth experience and newborn experience. And then in different seasons, I grieve more of like that giving him siblings is complicated, I grieve that. And then I grieve, you are in the therapies and then you graduate the therapies and you're so grateful, but you're also like, oh, that's another chapter that we're closing. And as it ebbs and flows with our kids, I feel like I'm processing different things. So it's less on like the NICU trauma and more on just like the residual of like what the family building journey looks like. And as a parent, just always wondering if you're doing things right. And like, always wondering like, am I making the right decisions? Is this, because you're always going to be advocating for them, right? And they're always going to be at the forefront. And so, I think over the years, it's just what I'm processing changes every sometimes second, than what it looked like in the beginning. And one thing that we had talked about on, I believe it was like I think you've touched on it, Aisha, on your grief episode before. I know Lindsay touched on it on the C-section episode, but what I want to touch on before we close here is just that you are deserving of feeling good. And I think sometimes when we are in dark places, sometimes that feels comfortable because feeling pain feels like it makes it more significant. If it still hurts really bad, then it still matters to me. Like if I still press on that bruise and it aches and hurts and then it's like, okay, good. It still means something to me. But to really get to a place in our healing alongside those providers and alongside that community where that bruise doesn't quite hurt as bad, but it doesn't make it any less significant. In fact, it allows us to really appreciate the significance of that journey. And so I think sometimes it can be tempting to feel like, well, if it doesn't hurt anymore, then it doesn't matter anymore. But that's quite the opposite. Like as you heal, I can talk about my NICU journey and maybe not cry, but it's still just as significant to me as it was the first day he entered the NICU. And so you are worthy of healing and of feeling good in your body and in your daily. And I just also want to commend that what each of you guys have shared about is it took work, it took time, it took intentionality, and it took courage. I think it's, we never want to minimize, like when we talk about like, just go to therapy. It's not, we all like are like, it's not that easy. We get it. Like scheduling that first appointment, sometimes going through a couple providers to find the right fit. Like sometimes that is the last thing you want to do. You're just like, dang it, I want to look at TikTok and just ignore everything else. So it takes courage to do it, but you are worth it. You are worth it. And we acknowledge the intentionality it requires. And we also want to really just remind you that you are worthy of that healing and of that care. And so maybe mamas, as kind of an ending, what hope would you provide to NICU mamas listening who might find themselves in a little bit of a darker season, or in a season of just severe disassociation or just confusion? What hope would you leave them as we close?
I was going to say that if you're listening to this podcast and you're in the depths of it right now, then you've already started some form of healing, that you've already taken one step forward in finding community, in trying to be heard and felt. And like Ashley said, we see you, we feel you. So even if you haven't made the call yet, or you're too scared to make the call yet, or you don't feel like you have that system around you to support you and lift you, even if you've made it this far in the episode or you've found Dear NICU Mama, then you really have started that journey. And I would just press you to keep going forward, because like Ashley said, you're worthy and you're not alone. And no one in this world should ever feel alone. Your babies weren't alone. They had doctors and nurses and you. And so you are also so deserving of that love, and to come out of a dark place that is only temporary. It is only temporary.
My hope, I also had that of, I want you to remind yourself that it is temporary. I think it's really hard when you're in the weeds to like be able to get yourself out and look at a big picture. But I do remember reminding myself all the time of like, this is temporary, like this is temporary. And even if you don't really believe it, because you're like, okay, but is it really? I would just keep reminding yourself of that. And then also I hope that throughout the podcast, you were able to take in that this is all normal. Like you're not alone, and it's normal to be angry, and it's normal to like feel good and then not feel good, and like it's all normal. Like it's all normal and it's temporary.
For me, what I would love to remind all of the moms listening is just that I think one of the most beautiful things about being human is that we get to experience this life in all of its color. And we talk about joy and grief coexisting, but they wouldn't exist without the other. So to feel one and not feel the other is impossible. You need to have both experiences to be able to appreciate any of them, right? And so just to remind you that there is nothing wrong with you, like Lexxa said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. There is time for you to make whatever next step you are ready to make, and just to allow yourself to really listen to what you need, and to give yourself permission to ask yourself what you need, because you deserve it. You deserve to be taken care of too.
I think as one kind of final, just gentle reminder is that you are still the best mother for your baby. There's no better mom than you. That doesn't mean that you can't ask for support to help you. In fact, we hope you do ask for that support and voice that support. I think as NICU moms, that's really hard to do when you already feel so tapped on what you can do as a mom. But if when you come home, you need help with just feeds or taking care of the house, some of those basic things just to be more present for your baby, I hope you ask for that. But that your mental health diagnosis or condition does not make you any less remarkable as a mom. And you are and always will be the best mother for your baby. And your baby knows your love. And as kind of a final, we also want to acknowledge that sometimes there are dark places that get really scary that we want to make sure we don't ignore. And so there is a hotline, 988 hotline. If you are having thoughts of self-harm, please reach out to that line, reach out to a trusted person to connect you with the resources that you need, because Mom, we need you here. You are worth it. You are loved. this sisterhood stands with you. And so there are resources out there for you that we want to make sure you know about. So in the show notes, we will have that number and that hotline, and then also a directory from PSI, which is remarkable, that really lists out all of the maternal mental health professionals throughout the U.S. that they can connect you with. So, mamas, thank you. This was so fun. I just want to keep chatting. I'm like, I wish we were like sitting on a couch and like cozied up together. Well, moms, we just hope this episode affirmed that you are remarkable and loved just as you are, and you are worthy of feeling good both in your body and your mind. And so the sisterhood is with you as a community, no matter where you are in your healing journey. And we love you so much. We'll be back next week with another episode, but have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much for listening to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. If you loved this episode, we'd be so grateful for a review.
For more ways to connect with the Dear NICU Mama Sisterhood, check out the links in the episode description.